In this chapter, Walsh analyzes how sapphire trading gives rise to particular lifestyle, social relations, and even particular terms and expressions. He describes some important characteristics of life and social relation in Ambondromi, such as the concept of hot money, daring and risking, or the idea of it being a town without parents. So when you are reading this chapter, I would like you to think about what are those? Why are these ideas significant for the town? What do they say about this region and about some of the phenomena and processes that are going on? Walsh study is part of several ethnographies that are studying circulating objects or commodities. And Walsh gives some examples of this at the beginning of this book. One example that is one of the earlier studies of this sort is by anthropologist Bestor. She looks at how tuna fish is created as a certain type of commodity. One of the surprising aspects that Bestor describes is that the tuna fish that is so prized for sushi in Japan, for example, as well as internationally, was in earlier periods described as cat food or fish that was just fit for cats. So one of her questions is, how did tuna fish become so prized internationally? And how is it being used in different places and produced in different places? And when we think about what she says that earlier it was understood as being just cat food or fish that was not that great, this is perhaps a little bit similar to how Walsh describes children using sapphires when playing with slingshots before the sapphire mining boom had started. So Bestor researched how a particular food becomes a commodity that is incredibly expensive. Tuna fish becomes so highly valued by circulating through global commodity chains. Some of the people that are involved include fishermen in Spain and in the US, fish auctions and markets, such as the one in Tokyo, fishing crews, restaurant suppliers, customers, and more. In the second week of the course, we talked about fieldwork and participant observation, and we said that this key methodology means immersing oneself in a particular place, in a particular culture, community, or a social context. But here I would like to add something more. In the last few decades, many anthropologists have been carrying out what is called multi-sited ethnography. What this means is that an anthropologist would carry out fieldwork in several different places, rather than just one, in order to understand how they are connected. For example, Bestor did research in Japan, Spain, and the US to see how tuna fish is fished, sold, auctioned, and consumed in several locations. Bestor's research on tuna fish addresses several questions. How do things become commodities? How do they travel between cultures and spaces? Which meanings do they have in different contexts? And one reason why anthropologists like Bestor trace circulating commodities, foods, goods, or objects, is to understand inequality between different people and regions. So the question is like, how are these things produced, and what does it mean for the people who produce them? But they're also interested in how the particular shape of these circulations affect the people who participate in it. Many of these studies, including the one of Bestor, follow the objects or follow the tuna fish or follow the goods that they are looking at, combining ethnography often in different locales. One of the very interesting things about Walsh's book, about Made in Madagascar, is that his ethnography studies how something becomes a commodity, how it is produced, traded, how it affects people and places, without following the object or the commodity. Walsh argues that it is very helpful and very valuable to research commodities from the perspective of those people who see these things leaving their communities. In doing so, anthropologists can see, so to speak, the traces these things leave behind. As he writes, by being left behind with the producers, in this case with the miners, anthropologists like him can see what happens in the places where these commodities are being produced, and can help him better understand the particular social life of places in the wake of things. That's why he calls this chapter Living in the Wake of Sapphire. This is a very important idea in his book more generally. And Walsh has a different paper that he published before writing this book. And in that paper, he discusses a little bit more how he adopts an approach that does not follow the commodity. And this is one of the things that he wrote there that I thought was really interesting. He writes, following things leads followers away from the unique perspectives of the people who see things off. So the perspective of people who see things leaving, in this case, the sapphires that are taken by traders elsewhere. Lacking the means or inclinations of anthropologists, these people, in the sense the miners, construct their biographies of things through prospective speculation based on local experiences and knowledge, and not, as anthropologists often do, through retrospective analysis based on exhaustive pursuit. So what this means is he's saying that anthropologists, can look back retrospectively, can look back at all the commodity chain, and from that it's easy to travel from one place to the next to see what actually happens to commodities. For example, what really happens to sapphire, what happens to tuna fish. But there is really a value also in seeing these things leaving, so to speak, departing from particular places, from particular communities, and sharing, so to speak, the sense of unknown that people have, and sharing the questions that the producer have when being involved in this kind of producing and trading. So by staying there but not following the commodity, then Walsh is able to study differences in power, for example, and difference in knowledge between various people like miners and traders that are engaged in producing commodities. So one way to think about this is by imagining that you have a group of people sitting together having a conversation. You can even imagine, that you could invite these people around your kitchen table, and you could have conversations with them, or listen to them having a conversation. So imagine each person in this small group was a particular person participating in or seeing the sapphire business in Ankara. We would perhaps have a miner, a local trader, so somebody who is in the stalls buying and selling sapphires, a foreign buyer or trader, that could be perhaps somebody from Thailand, as Walsh writes in his book. That could be an anthropologist, who could be just like Walsh, and a tourist. Now imagine, just for a moment, that you would be one of his characters, and that you could be all of his characters in turn. As these characters, or if you were one of these people, what would you want to know from all the others? And what do you know that the others may not know? In turn, what do the others know that you do not know? And consider, why is your knowledge helpful, and why and how? To whom could it be helpful? How is their knowledge helpful to you, and why and how? A key insight of watching this chapter, in fact, and in the book more generally, is that differences in knowledge are part of the business of Sapphire, in the sense that what you don't know and others do can potentially hurt you. Also, the knowledge you have reflects your position in this business, and more generally, in the circulation of Sapphires. And trying to get knowledge and hiding at least part of this knowledge from others is actually an everyday need, as it is what results potentially in an advantage or a profit when thinking of selling and trading. For this reason, suspicion, guesswork, trying to find out things, speculating, just as Walsh says, as well as hiding things or not telling the whole truth, are practices that are inherent in the trade. They are part of the trade of Sapphires. Wondering about the true use of Sapphires, wondering about why they are traded, and all of those questions are part of the business, part of what is going on. Walsh says that we could interpret the questions of the miners about the true uses of Sapphires that he discusses in his introduction as a matter of factual difference, not being able to understand why Sapphires are valued as jam, or even not liking Sapphires as jam. However, this would miss an important aspect. So he says, this is kind of a mistake to interpret it like that. Instead, look at people's questions about what Sapphires are used for, shows how the trading and reproducing of Sapphires is organized, and how people are organized within it, what kind of positions they can adopt, how and why. In fact, it shows that they are connected to other participants in this trade, and that they are very aware of what is going on, and that they are particularly aware of their knowledge differentials. All of this has interesting consequences. Miners both cooperate with each other, but are also suspicious of each other. The questions of an anthropologist in this context are also suspicious. People are wondering, what does he know? Why does he want to find out? What do we tell him? Notice that the anthropologist here, and I'm thinking of Walsh, has a particular role and fits in a very interesting way. Perhaps Walsh didn't plan it to be that way, but when he arrived there, he found themselves in a particular role, and he found his questions interpreted in a particular way just because of the both suspicion and cooperation that is going on, right? And all of these questions people have about Sapphires. Tourists, on the other hand, are also seen with suspicion, just like an anthropologist is, right? People are wondering, well, can we really believe them? Do tourists really only want to take pictures? Who knows? How do we know? And really, who can we trust? These are all questions that Walsh discusses as, that people are wondering about. And this is also a good place to return to the introduction and Walsh research questions that you read just a couple of weeks ago at the beginning of the course, right? In his introduction, Walsh discusses not just his research questions, but also the questions that people asked him. You might remember this from reading the introduction a few weeks ago. And one of the most interesting and puzzling one for him was the question, what are Sapphires used for? One important thing for you to notice here is that Walsh took the question his interlocutor asked him as important clues, so to speak, to the Sapphire trade, to what is happening in Ankara and to the complexity of knowledge differentials. Moreover, questions that people wondered about, such as why foreigners were there, why did they do there, what did they want, and why they were profited from the region more than the locals, were actually very similar to questions that Walsh himself was interested in. In this way, then, Walsh research questions and the questions by local people, whether they were directed to him or directed to each other, were actually connected. And it is exactly this connection that this book analyzes. It is this connection that actually teaches Walsh about the Sapphire business and what is happening in this place.